Greetings, students, and welcome to week 12. This week, we're talking about teaching and coaching search, how to work with users, clients, and students. So the problem I see with this week is that depending upon where you land in library land or info land, teaching and learning will look a bit different. So, our agenda this week is to look at the reference interview, not in great depth, but just as an overview, to consider the user's journey, and we looked at that in week 2, but we'll just revisit that briefly. What things to consider when coaching and teaching, the types of learning experiences that you're likely to be involved in, strategies for remote coaching and developing an online instructional voice, and also strategies for assessing your impact. Our essential questions will be: what does effective practice look like in teaching and coaching search? What are some options for face-to-face and online instruction? And how might we assess whether or not we have impact? We'll revisit just a bit some of the information seeking process models that we introduced in week 2. And we'll also revisit Ranganathan, or some folks call him Ranganathan. I'm not really sure what's right. Remember, in 1931, he posed the 5 laws of library science that we're still looking at in kind of meme form today. Ranganathan suggested that books are for use, that every reader his or her book, every book its reader. Save the time of the reader. A library is a growing organism. And when you think about that in terms of how we're interacting with users today, we think about books, media, tools, resources in all formats are for use and also for creation. That we are trying to connect every learner with his or her media tools and channels. That every book, media, or resource might have its user, consumer, or producer. That we're trying to help the learner, the user, the patient become more effective, efficient, and productive users and creators of ideas and information. That library or information organizations, virtual or physical, are growing organisms offering 24/7, anywhere, anytime access, learning, connections, and instruction. From 1931, let's move to 1956, where you may remember Herbert Simon coined the term satisficing, that portmanteau between satisfying and sufficing, where we remember that users may not go the extra mile to find excellent when they can find something that's good enough. Let's also take another look at the classic information retrieval model, which may be far more complicated than we thought to examine years ago, where there's this kind of connection, an automatic connection between the query and the information need and the document and its representation. And among the complications that folks have talked about were Brenda Dervin in her sense-making model, where she recognized gaps in knowledge that need to be bridged with the help of a professional. It described the kinds of complications for the user in terms of getting to sense-making and relevance and finding the right stuff to bridge the gaps. Brenda Dervin talked about the types of helps that users got in that journey to cross their bridges. Marcia Bates talked about the berry picking model and the various different non-linear ways that people went through in seeking information. And Melissa Gross distinguished the imposed query from the self-imposed or self-inspired need to find information. And the imposed query is often what we see in public libraries and schools, where somebody says, hey, we need you to find this, rather from, oh my, I really need to find this on my own. Let's also remember Kuhlthau's ISP, information search process, where she connected the affective with the information search that we need when we are working with users to understand that it's confusing and frustrating at some points, and some points it's satisfying, but understanding that users are going through this journey, and the task and the ways they may feel along the way, from the task initiation selection to the presentation of uncertainty and optimism, really helps us as we work with users, clients, and students. You can remember that Morville and Callender focused their model on the user experience, acknowledging that users have goals, different types of thinking, different types of behaviors, and interact differently with interfaces. And you'll also remember to keep in mind the 4 end user search types, and their various different experiences with both domains and with systems. So as we move forward into this lecture, I want you to recognize that this is really not a comprehensive treatment of how to interact and coach users. Please read your text. Please look at some of the examples in our playlist. And of course, some of this is going to be on the job learning. So as I mentioned, teaching and learning may look different depending upon your professional aspirations. And people in this class and the ones that will follow you are interested in these and probably many, many more work settings. So let's look at instruction. And I want to first ask you, what was your stickiest learning experience? Do you remember something? For me, I remember watching my 2 kids learn how to ride a 2-wheeler. We worked with both kids. I worked myself with both kids during one weekend, and it was all about showing Daddy when he returned from his business adventure. And so I started thinking about what made that experience sticky. And the research shared that these are the elements that make sticky learning. There's an audience. There's an element of choice involved. There's wonder. It's hands-on. It's playful. Often it's collaborative. It's authentic. It has real purpose. It's multimodal and it's relevant. Those are things to keep in mind as you design learning experiences. Let's begin by considering the reference interview as a true learning experience. It's my contention that what might be thought of as an experience that is transactional, kind of like going to a grocery store, you pay your money and you get your bags of groceries and you go home, don't think too much more about them. But instead, I think that the reference experience can be transformational. I think learning can happen. And we'll go a little deeper into what types of learning can happen in just a bit. But before we do, let's see what happens to Bunny when he meets the reference librarian in Marky's video.
Librarians show their chops by finding users the right information to suit their needs. Being able to do so starts at the reference interview, asking the right questions to find out what users really want as opposed to what they initially asked for. Let's start with this library user. Cut! The reference interview starts before the user even says anything. If you work at the desk in between questions, make sure to keep the desk clear of clutter. Look up occasionally and smile as users approach you to make them feel welcome. Let's roll the cameras again. Action.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm sorry to bother you.
Oh, it's no bother. It's my job to answer questions.
Well, I have this paper and I'm a little bit lost.
Okay, what's your topic?
My topic's on slavery.
No problem. Most of our books on slavery seem to be in the E400s. Do you know where those books are located?
Yes, thank you.
Cut! In this interview, the librarian jumps the gun, prompting the self-effacing and insecure Bunny about his topic only once. As a consequence, he sends Bunny to the stacks to browse the books at call number E400, where he'll find books on slavery in the United States, decidedly not on what he wants. Let's go back a step. Action!
Okay, when is your project due?
Tomorrow.
All right. When I search for you, I'll limit to things that are in this library so you can get them today. Do you have a topic?
I was thinking of doing slavery.
That's a big topic. Let's see if we can narrow it down a little. What class is this for?
World civilization. I picked Asia.
That should narrow it down a little. Which Asian country interests you?
Korea?
Okay, good. Let's start by searching our discovery system and see what's there. Now, it looks like most things are about World War II. Were you thinking of the Japanese invasion?
No, earlier than that. I think it's during the Joseon dynasty?
Oh, okay. Here we go. Now, did your professor ask you to find a particular type of resource?
See, with good listening skills and a few open-ended questions, you've elicited from the user what really interests him and found relevant, quality sources from your library's web-scale discovery system for his paper. Few users will blurt out exactly what they want from the get-go. Be prepared to ask questions, getting users to talk about their interests. Make sure you negotiate every reference interview so you learn what users really want, rather than what they think you want to hear from them.
When I first started at the Free Library of Philadelphia, one of my mentors helping me be a new librarian said, "Whatever you do, don't be a pointer." She meant that I should look and be approachable, that I should establish contact with the user. Do not wait. Raise your eyes if you know somebody's waiting and acknowledge them. Do not give off a vibe that you'd rather be somewhere else. You need to listen actively, check regularly for understanding. You could also get up, reach out, rove, and be embedded. Make sure that the answer that you discover meets the user's real need. In person or online, ask, "Did this completely answer your question?" Or, "What else would you like to know?" Use language that the user will understand. Ultimately, you really want to help, and you also really want them to come back. Brown and Bell also offer advice on the reference experience. They suggest that we need to negotiate or determine the real question, reminding us that people don't always ask for what they really need. And we need to use a combination of open-ended and closed questions. Among the open-ended questions are, what resources have you already tried? Are there any resources that you found helpful so far? Can you tell me how you intend to use this information? Is it a short project or a major project? What would your ideal answer look like? What are you envisioning coming away with today? And then there are the close or the sort of fill-in-the-blank type questions. When do you need this information by? Are you looking for primary or secondary sources? Have you used blank this particular resource before? Are you looking for current or historical information? As we're doing this, we really need to think about exploring all possible worlds, perhaps offering the user a summary of the scope of the possible sources available. But we should always avoid making incorrect assumptions and really commit to the notion that the user deserves our best response. Here's a little bit more from Marky on interacting with library patrons.
Busy, especially when students realize they have research papers coming due. Your interaction with them needs to move quickly, as you may be working the desk by yourself and others will be lining up for your help. To get them their resources quickly, practice moving through this process. Naturally, start with the reference interview. This is your chance to help the user narrow things down and start figuring out the smaller pieces you'll eventually use for searching. As you talk together, you'll start to think of which databases will be right. Then it's time to jump into the void with a decision to search for a known item or a more general subject search. It can be daunting to step off the edge, but if you've been asking the right questions and listening, you should be able to make an educated guess. These first 3 steps will happen very quickly, almost simultaneously, especially as you start to get more practice. Beware, though, if the student has only one facet, it may be necessary to point them in the direction of a more general encyclopedia, subject dictionary, or other discipline-specific reference source in order to narrow down their topic. This is an especially common problem with first-year composition courses, where students have a lot of freedom in choosing their topic and may be overly focused on something like censorship, or climate change, or slavery. Alternatively, conduct a controlled vocabulary search for these topics in a research database, showing the user its subject-oriented clusters to narrow things down. Once you have the topic narrowed, it's time to take your little pieces and rearrange them into your facet analysis and logical combination. This is where you use the tools and strategies learned here in order to formulate a search statement to feed into the database you've chosen. How you formulate your statements depends on which database you've chosen, since they're all a little different. It's a good idea to stick with the a la carte version of the building block strategy when you're pressed for time, since it works with both Boolean and extended Boolean systems. One search term per facet should be good enough to get the patron started, and you can always tweak things from there. Most systems have the capability to email a search, complete with the search boxes and all, to a patron. If you have multiple patrons in line, it's a good idea to email them a link and remind them that they can always come back if things aren't working out. Before you call things done, make sure to take a gander at the results and make sure you're on the right track. You should also explain to the user how the system displays retrievals lists and how to change it, and point out push-button ways of finding more relevant retrievals, such as cited references and find like links. Then you can safely send the patron on their own research adventure.
People are actively engaged in doing reference on their own more than ever before. And so reference, we know, happens when we're not looking, and it can occur over multiple modalities and platforms. A lot of folks in a lot of journals and conferences talk about the future of reference. Certainly it's changed since web search emerged, since Google and other search tools emerged, since Wikipedia emerged as a very well relied upon reference tool. That took a while to happen. And it's still under investigation. COVID certainly changed how and where we learn and how and where we seek reference. Now, since COVID, librarians have adjusted practice that they had been adjusting for several years already and tried to meet their users in places where they could safely get to them. We are seeing the emergence of generative AI, and folks are using these chatbots to answer reference questions for good or bad. We are seeing the emergence of a variety of tools that are based on large language models, and people are using them as reference. In fact, librarians are. Users, for the most part, have a greater sense of independence that they've had ever before. And there is a demand for online training, for the type of friendly online training that reaches our users and lets them know that some of the things that they may need the most are behind paywalls or difficult to access without a professional. We're meeting our patrons in worlds that are digital, virtual, largely more and more mobile, in some cases bot-based, in some cases accessed through their digital assistants. We are discovering that it is more important than ever to be embedded into the spaces in which people live, play, and learn. For instance, for many people who are learners, it's Canvas and Google Classroom sites. For others, it's reaching them on social media. We have to anticipate where we will encounter our users and what they may have missed by not connecting with an information professional. We also are responsible for supporting new types of literacy, and we'll talk about that more in a little bit. In addition, we're responsible for addressing digital rights management issues. Ebooks have been a Wild West show for a very long time. Patrons don't understand that for some management models, there is a one user borrow, and we need to negotiate systems that'll allow a more liberal license so that users can borrow the materials they need or access the materials they need when they need them without a wait list. We need to advocate for greater access, equity, and inclusion in our platforms. We need to recognize that more and more we're going to need resources that address issues relating to language and can be translated and really understand multilingual users. We also need to connect with our users with a sense of cultural humility, to respect what they know and to approach them in a way that is not based on deficits, but is based on understanding our users' assets. So let's take a little bit of a look at instruction. We talked about the reference interview, we talked about reference services, but really librarians are involved in an awful lot of different types of instruction. That instruction can be formal and informal. That instruction can be about lifelong learning. How do I do this now that I'm retired? What kind of help might I get with my taxes? Can I get medical information? And this kind of life-wide learning that expands across, for our students especially, their scholarly interests, their interests that have to do with K-12 learning, to their long tail interests regarding musical instruments or popular culture. So we're involved, libraries are educational institutions, and we're involved in all sorts of instruction, whether or not it seems like a formal instructional event with a lesson plan. You see that that ALA's core values, one of the major, one of the ones that is always listed, of course, is education and lifelong learning. ALA promotes the creation, maintenance, and enhancement of a learning society, encouraging its members to work with educators, government officials, and organizations and coalitions to initiate and support comprehensive efforts to ensure that school, public, academic, and special libraries in every community cooperate to provide lifelong services to all. In school libraries, of course, if you are not teaching most of the time or working or planning with classroom teachers, you're probably not doing it right. Teaching and learning, of course, may look different depending upon your own professional aspirations. In school libraries, as in many other libraries, we have standards, frameworks, guidelines to help us understand what it is the people around us might need in terms of their learning needs and how we might address our teaching. So that was the AASL Standards Framework for Learners. This is an example of a more localized version. This is New York State's Empire State Information Fluency Continuum, and this uses Barb Stripling's model of inquiry. And there are several different models of inquiry out there. Information literacy can be expressed, the information seeking process can be expressed in different ways. There are definitely similarities, resonance among them. This is Dr. Carol Kuhlthau's guided inquiry model, and you are probably familiar with, mentioned earlier, the ISP that Dr. Kuhlthau also developed. These are other ways that we might guide the students or in our community through a lengthy inquiry process. And K-12, we have Mike Eisenberg and Bob Berkowitz's Big Six and Super 3 models. Super 3 is for younger children. Again, these are information literacy models. This one particularly is an information problem-solving model. And this can apply, or a version of this can apply, wherever people need and use information. In academic libraries, we see instruction happening in a variety of different ways. Very often, we need to make the most of one-shot sessions. We get a class, they come in for one lesson before they start a project or at the beginning of a semester, or we have an opportunity to do an orientation. We also see the notion of embedding research skills into a semester-long course, and many librarians love the opportunity to work with students in a prolonged and sustained way. We often consult with faculty on course design and assessments. This is becoming even more important when we're embedded into the learning management system. Sometimes there are 4-credit information literacy courses. Often they have to do with bibliographic instruction, but sometimes they're involved in a much broader way in terms of information literacy. Academic librarians also conduct workshops for faculty, students, and staff. And we also see online instruction on library sites, tutorials, screencast videos, interactivities, and games. And sometimes these games involve digital credentials like badging. And we also see online embedded instruction on our faculty or departmental sites. And more, we're seeing them in learning management systems like Canvas. And we're seeing also that the databases we know and love play nice with Canvas and LibGuides and the learning management system. So how we pull all this together in terms of design is also a form of instruction. At the academic level, we've been looking at these throughout the semester, but we have the ACRL standards and competencies that guide our teaching as it relates to information literacy. And we are advised by the ACRL standards that it is also important for us to collaborate with faculty as we address the threshold concepts of the ACRL standards and frameworks. Our texts offer some advice and set some teaching principles for us. So according to Brown and Bell, we should teach to our audience, keep them in mind as we prepare our sessions. We should avoid lecturing, listen, give time to process, connect, offer hands-on time. We should wait for answers. In K-12, we always say 2 minutes is a good time to wait, even though it feels like forever. Ask questions with purpose and wait for people to answer. People need time to marshal their responses. It is hard to wait. Less is more. Don't overwhelm your audience by trying to do too much. And it's hard when you have a one shot and when you don't have too many opportunities to reach folks. In K-12, it's a lot easier. In the public library, you may have a sustained informal relationship. Be transparent in your teaching. Lay out your goals and objectives. Be honest. Share what you are sharing and how it will be useful. You have a right to be wrong. It's perfectly acceptable to be wrong occasionally and not have all the answers. You can say, hey, wait a minute, I just don't know. Let me look into that. When you're teaching with technology, slow down, anticipate failure, always have a plan B, keep calm and carry on. Practice, be prepared, get your anxiety under control. If you don't do this every day, sometimes you can be anxious. And it's really fun working with your community most of the time, so try to enjoy the ride. Markey offers some advice as well. She talks about what users might have the most trouble with, and these are things we looked at earlier in the semester. Distinguishing between surrogate and full text. It's very frustrating for a user to expect a whole article to pop up when using a surrogate database, and you may need to explain how to use a link resolver or how you can help them get the content. They may need help with understanding how cluster features work and how to explore broad topics and discover terms through exploding and narrowing. Limiting to quality retrievals by using some filters like peer review, scholarly, or journal. How to find, again, full text, understanding the value of databases versus the free web, and again, using those facets and filters. They may not be aware of the value of those on the left and right panels if they're just vertically going down a result list. You can invite users to visit you in a variety of different ways, as we said, in person. And if they're with you in person, you can also follow up via phone, email, chat, or however they communicate the best. You can consider helping users with some of the things they're likely not to be aware of. For instance, citation management systems like RefWorks or Zotero or Mendeley or EasyBib or Noodle Tools. To when they log in, to really use the saving features of the search systems, especially understanding what permalinks are, that URL on the top of the screen may not actually be a sustainable but durable URL. How to save searches, set up alerts, and just in general, talking users through the search process. It's not the same as an ATM transaction. In fact, relating to moving beyond the transactional, Markey advises, consider making a practice of leaving each and every user with one information literacy-oriented tip above and beyond the information that satisfies their immediate information need. It's a little sneaky, but it can make a huge difference. You also want to really try hard to be embedded into the learning management system. As I said before, when we were looking at the advice from Markey, Brown, and Bell, there are a growing number of learning management systems, K through 20, and we're also using learning management systems for informal learning, for MOOCs, for digital badging systems. And so how do you get library resources in there? Over the past few years, we've seen a personalization of services. Among them is the movement towards concierge librarians. Sometimes they take the form of the freshman experience librarian. In this case, Dave Lankes is explaining on acceptance to the university, each freshman is assigned concierge librarian. Within the first few weeks on campus, a student meets with his or her librarian to review how they can use the university's resources and systems in and beyond the library. For instance, how to get around on the bus system. They review syllabi and develop approaches to Excel, and the librarian walks the student through the mix of the things that they need to use, including how to navigate the bursar's office and registration. And I can't imagine how this wouldn't develop in a really important adult-student relationship, or student, some of these students are adults, or just a really nice personal relationship connection with the librarian as both a formal teacher and an informal mentor. So consider that if your library or your school doesn't have that at the university level, or consider that approach at a public library, just informally. The Library Instruction Roundtable from ALA, I often go to their programs and read about the awards that they have there. And it's a good place to go if you want to look for innovative practice in instruction. Often this has to do with information literacy instruction and improved reference. Speaking of connecting and mentoring, I want to talk a little bit about what that looks like to.
When it comes to research, do your students struggle to find the right sources? Are research questions flooding your inbox? Maybe we can help. An embedded librarian can work with online, face-to-face, or hybrid courses using Canvas. We can provide video tutorials, curated research guides, monitor discussion boards to post library materials and field questions, or even offer live instruction. Your students will have personalized access to a librarian who can be contacted by phone, email, chat, in person at the library, or within your Canvas course. Embedded librarians can help improve the online research experience for everyone. If you're interested in working with an embedded librarian this term, contact me, Ross Martin, to learn more.
That was from Seminole State, but you're seeing embedded librarianship all over university campuses, and it's important. The librarians as subject specialists very often can really help students through those courses, and having a faculty connection so that you can get into that Canvas shell and reach the students when they're in their dorm rooms or when they're traveling. This is really important, and the value you add to the syllabus, the course, the activities is often immeasurable. So it's really a great goal to become embedded. I am really impressed with the growing number of portals there are out there in which librarians are sharing best practice in information literacy instruction. And so I pulled together this blog post a while back that listed 5 of my personal favorites. Perhaps my true favorite is Quora, the Community of Online Research Assignments, and you can search this by ACRL standard and a variety of other skills or competencies. There are some really innovative lessons there. You can see the latest or the featured assignment. The teaching toolkit lists many of the other portals that you're going to want to check out for inspiration in teaching information literacy. This week, you'll be finding your favorite. You'll be searching some of these portals to find one piece of instruction that you're going to share in an instructional. So I'm hoping that you'll do some digging and find something truly excellent to share with the class in our own Pearl Trees board. I want to share with you Stephen Bell from Temple University, his idea of what great service looks like in terms of guiding students at the university level. But think about what it might look like at a variety of different library settings.
Hi, I'm a graduate student at the College of Education, and I am working towards my PhD in educational psychology, and I hope to defend my dissertation in 2023. I'm usually really pressed for time, and that's why I love having my own customized relationship with the library through the Library That Learns You initiative. The My Library account feature on their website is where it all starts. I can seamlessly add any of my personal accounts, my Google Calendar, my box, and I can find all of it on my phone, which is really helpful. It's kind of like the library gets to know me, and because of that, they can send me information before I even ask for it. It's as if the library is learning about me, and because of that, they can send me information I need even before I ask for it. It's perfect for a busy lifestyle and really helps me stay on track academically. Take last semester, for example, I had this research project due, and weeks before it was actually due, my smart device was sending me suggestions for topics to do the paper on, and it even got me connected to a library expert in my field. I was so ahead of the game, it was crazy. With each project, the library is learning more and more about me, and I can't help but think that I'm going to be in great shape when it comes to researching my dissertation, so thank you, Temple Library.
When we're teaching, it's really important to understand if we're making an impact and to what degree we're making an impact. And so after you do workshops, after you do one-shots, after you do a full semester of teaching, after you do whatever it is you're doing, and during, you want to collect evidence. How are you doing? What are the learners that you're exposing to your instruction, are they really learning? And so you have to do a bit of an assessment, and you also have to reflect. One way to do that is to use exit tickets, and this is, of course, figurative, but there are multiple ways you can do this. When I was at the high school, I would ask students to give me, this often was in the form of a Google form, share any one of these questions, not all of them. Share 3 takeaways from today's class. Share 1 lingering question. What did your group accomplish during this period or block? What were the best sources you discovered today? What criteria did you use to evaluate your sources today? How might you apply what you learned today in a situation outside of school? I don't understand. Sometimes this could be a really important question to ask. I would like to learn more about. Think about how you might adapt one question to ask the students or the community that you're working with as they leave a program, a workshop, a class. There are a whole bunch of interactive presentation tools or assessment tools or exit ticket tools. This is one blog post that gathered a few of them. Among my favorites are the ones here on this slide, and these are all hyperlinked, and you definitely can try them. I often use these in presentations. Flip is another of my favorites. If you've had another class with me, you probably know that I use this video response, and it forms a threaded discussion, but very often you can just have the students, it can be as private as you make it. You can have the students tell you how they're feeling. I also use this as a formative assessment during a lengthy research project. I had students record video and tell me where they stand at this point. And what's really cool about video is not only do you get the thoughtful, well, hopefully it's thoughtful response that somebody composes in a written expression, but you can also see a little bit of the affective nature of the response when they're doing video. You can see the stress. You can see when somebody's feeling proud. And so you can do this in a learning management system, but it is a very effective way to assess understanding and gather evidence. You could leave Post-it notes at the end of a session. And I love Pear Deck because it allows you to collect data in a variety of different ways, both qualitative and quantitative. You can see on the bottom right, when I asked a question there, You could see the dots forming a bit of a bar graph, but there's also, you could actually have people draw their responses or do short answers. So that's really great when you're working with a whole bunch of people who have mobile devices. As is Kahoot, which is more of a multiple choice question answer game that's lots of fun. And Nearpod is another one to work with, to put your presentation in students' iPads or tablets, and the lecture becomes interactive with quizzes and surveys right inside. And then for a low-tech approach, Plickers is these little things that you print, and the way the students hold them, there are 4 different types of responses, and you can quickly scan with your iPhone and see how many students understood. It'll give you a quick count of how many responses are in each of it, or how many of each response you get. Quizzes is just another one that is kind of like Kahoot. It has different features. You might want to give that a try. And very simply, at the end of a lesson, putting it on a whiteboard or a flip chart and getting a count. I understand how to blank, yes, no, or what other questions, and just kind of do it in the form of graffiti.
And so summing up, we are going to be teaching in the various situations that we find ourselves in library land. Some of us to a greater degree than others, but I want us to think about opportunities for learning and all of the interactions in which we engage with, including our colleagues. You will discover many options for presenting, engaging with others, and in assessing your instruction. Have fun with this, be creative, make a difference, and make everyone want to come back to the library.